has been teaching here at El Camino College for 22 years. He teaches geology and oceanography, and he is by far one of the most popular professors on campus, and you'll find out why. He has established El Camino's program as the largest geology program in the state and probably in the country. So once again, El Camino is excelling in what we do in our academic rigor. Joe has run the honors transfer program for over 10 years. And honors transfer is for students who come to El Camino College with the distinct intent to transfer within 2 years to a four-year university. And I'm going to guess at the stats, but I'll let you correct me. I know that over 95% of our students who enter the honors transfer program successfully transfer to the university of their choice. Is that correct? Yeah. And Joe is also a naturalist for National Geographic and has been doing that for over 20 years. So it's my honor to introduce Professor Holliday.
We're so lucky El Camino has Katie, and do they know bad news?
You're welcome.
Okay, we're gonna miss her when she eventually retires. So, and we're also lucky to have Arturo because we have a really good Mason program, and we're also lucky to have my dean, Jean Tankweiler, as I think the best dean on campus. Shh, I can't tell anybody I said that, but I'm so lucky to have a great dean and a great office. So, as Katie said, I'm a geologist, but I also have a background in biology and oceanography. So, when I had my sabbatical about 4 years ago, I chose to do it on my passion, which is polar studies. And because I have this long association with National Geographic, cue the music. I got to go on, and I continue to go on journeys with them. Okay. And so, anyway, so for 20 years I've been traveling with National Geographic, and for the last 5 years I've been going to the polar places with them, such as Antarctica and the Arctic Ocean. I was just in the Arctic last month, and I'm going to Antarctica again with them this Christmas. And the reason why I like to go with them is they provide this awesome opportunity to study the polar regions as it pertains to global climate change. Because as you probably heard before you walked in here from your reading, is that it's happening faster in the polar regions than it's happening in the temperate regions or the tropical regions. So I'm going to start, because you don't want to look at me the whole time. So, a lot of this you may know, and I'm starting out slowly, and then I'm going to get to the more fun photos as we get going here. All right. And the one thing that has been in the press a lot is the temperature is going up. You may have heard that 9 out of the warmest 10 years have happened in the last 10 years. Okay, so it's going up and up and up. And this has been going on at a rapid pace since 1900. And the most interesting thing is that it slowed down after World War II. And to me, that's very important because you all know what happened in World War II is all the industry and automobiles and everything in Europe and East Asia were all destroyed. So that to me is very interesting, the important piece of the equation. And the carbon dioxide is the cause of this, according to over 98% of all scientists. And the CO2 record we have in the light green, we have actual samples that started in Hawaii. Some really great scientists decided to start saving vials, and they can extrapolate back using bubbles in ice cores in Greenland and Antarctica, the rest. But here again, you can see around 1900 it started its rapid increase. And the greenhouse gases that you've probably heard about they're invisible. We can't see them, you can't smell them, and they're all around us. And they're our friend. There's CO2 and water and methane. But the amount of methane is not increasing that much yet. And the amount of water, even though a month like this is very humid, there's a lot of humidity, but that's not increasing worldwide. It's CO2 that is increasing. And I'm sure you've heard that the vast majority of scientists believe it's from the burning of fossil fuels. And okay, what's wrong with CO2? CO2 is our friend. It makes our trees grow, and it makes our plants grow, and it makes our crops grow, and they do grow faster up to a certain point. But the problem is it acts like a blanket. And as you know, if you put too many blankets on at night, you're gonna get overheated. And in the most extreme case you may have heard about is in Venus, where it's 600, 700 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's mostly because of the CO2. It's not because it's closer to the ocean. I mean, closer to the sun. It's because it has a lot more CO2. Great, and so what I've been studying is what is the effect? And you think, oh, there's no effect in Antarctica. Antarctica is this frozen icebox down there, isolated by currents and everything. But it is having an effect way down in the coldest place on Earth. And the example here is the penguin on the left, the one that's in the tuxedo. That's the Adelie penguin. They're slowly going extinct, and their range is disappearing. The same with the emperor penguin, the one that you may have seen in March of the Penguins. Their range is also decreasing. And the guys that are taking over are the Gen 2 penguins. And this video, I have to start manually for some reason. So penguins are cute, okay, and they're really not a march of the penguins. When it comes to Adelie penguins, they're more of a slide of the penguin. They love to slide. But these are the guys that are getting rarer and rarer, and it's tough to see them. You have to be on a very ice-hardened ship to go see them because their range is decreasing. And the scientists down at Palmer Station, I visited Palmer Research Station. It's on the peninsula, the part of Antarctica that sticks up toward South America. And the scientists there are researching this, and they're looking at all sorts of things. And it's related, as you can imagine, to the food supply. As the warmer the water, the less krill there are, and copepods, and the less krill there are, the less fish, and the less fish, it has an effect on the penguins. Okay. One that's another result is quite complicated, but I think you'd appreciate how complicated certain subjects in this college are, such as oceanography. One thing we stress a lot in oceanography is the richest fishing areas in the world are where we have upwell, places like the Peru coast, the California coast, the west coast of Africa. And this upwelling, it depends on cold water. That's the main reason. It's only found in 5 places in the world. Richest fishing in the whole world, and it needs cold water coming down from the polar regions. Well, if the water's warming up, and it is warming up, then the upwelling's slowing down. So that's going to hurt the fishing and the wildlife in places like Peru and California. And one of the places I visit a lot, almost every year, is Alaska, and that has cold water, very productive. How many people here have been to Alaska? Okay, you know they're famous for the whales, the humpback whales, and the killer whales, and the stellar sea lions. It's awesome wildlife, puffins and things like that. But there again, if you have warmer water, there's less nutrients being stirred up from the bottom of the seafloor, and therefore less copepods and less krill, and therefore less fish. And so it's having effect even in the ocean. It's not just on land. On land, one of the scarier aspects of this warming is that we have, in our modern world, we've developed most of the valleys and the plains, and the wildlife has, understandably, been left on our mountaintops. You know, most of our national parks, like Yellowstone and Mount Rainier, are in the mountain ranges. And the problem is that as the world warms, these species can only go uphill, and they can only go uphill as fast as their bodies can move them. So animals like worms just can't do it. They can't migrate that fast. Animals like the pika here on the left can do it, but eventually it's going to run out of food. And that's the fear of wildlife biologists. And I have a degree in biology, but I don't teach wildlife biology. But that is the big fear, is our isolated areas of wildlife, and the fact that with this warming going on, they're only so fast they can move, and there's only so far they can move. These are areas that show, based on the climate, how fast they can move. And so there's thousands of scientists all over the world doing their PhDs and their research and everything on this. And basically, the temperature change in the red areas is going very, very rapid. And in the blue, it's not so fast. So it's, and you can see on the bottom here that I think you know that wetlands are very rich environments for wildlife and productivity and food sources, and that change is happening even faster there. Fortunately, fish can migrate, but other animals can't necessarily migrate. This gets complicated, but any of you who've been to Alaska or the Pacific Northwest can relate to this. Is the salmon is like the best fish, right? And we have this awesome fishery up there. Thousands of people make their living on fish, and millions of Americans eat salmon. But salmon, as you know, they swim upstream, right? And they the idea is that they swim upstream and they lay their eggs, and so that the young can be born and hatch about the same time that the little insects and the isopods and the arthropods and everything in the ocean and in the streams are. And if that's out of whack, if there's warming going on, the insects, the invertebrates, will hatch earlier. And the salmon get there and like, we're late. No food for the babies. Okay, the same with the birds. Of course, birds can accommodate by migrating. The recent studies that I just read over the weekend is that birds have to migrate an extra kilometer, about an extra half mile every year in order to catch up with this change in their food supply. And everybody loves the grizzlies, right? Actually, most people are afraid of them, but I love them. I happen to love seeing grizzly bears. And what we tend to think of them as being these vicious animals that eat people, but they don't. They get most of their food, 90% of food is from vegetable matter, from nuts, pine nuts, if you can believe it. The problem with the warming, in Alaska, they think the warming has gone up 4 degrees Fahrenheit in my lifetime. And you think, oh, that's great for plants. They have a longer growing season. It is, however, it's also good for insects. And so the pine bark beetle and the spruce budworm, they have a longer growing season too. And so it's killing vast tracts of spruce up. And if you've been to the Seward to Anchorage area, there's a lot of dead forests up there. And vast tracts around the northern Rockies. And if you don't care about trees, maybe you care about the animals that eat these seeds. So it turns out the grizzlies get a lot of their food from the seeds of conifer trees. Doesn't seem right, does it? You think of squirrels, but not bears. Okay, and then for humans, of course, are all afraid of disease, and there's a lot of news on Ebola and everything. But what Ebola it's been horrible. But it's killed thousands of people, right? But malaria kills 600,000 every year. Almost all children, all under 5, because there's an immunity factor that builds up. Almost 1 million people die every year, and that zone is spreading, and obviously disease control specialists are really worried about things like yellow fever coming back to America. And we don't really have to worry. We got the best medical care, right? But if it's spreading in a place like Brazil or India, you're talking about millions of people that might be not immune to it. They didn't grow up with it, but now they might get hit with it as an adult. I just threw this in to show you that I do everything. I'll like pull a boat, okay? And so that's the ship that I spend about a month on every year. And so it gets stuck in this, you know, they have to get the lowest ranking crew member out there and say, Joe, you only have 10 years of college, you go pull it down. So, okay, so if I haven't depressed you enough, I'm mostly trying to expand your mind and get you to think, go online, do your own research. That's what we try to get our students to do, is go in with an open mind. This information is out there on neutral websites, and I'm going to show you some of the websites in the end that are sponsored by the US government. And ocean acidification, we stress a lot in oceanography. As you add CO2, the gas, the one, you know, stuff we breathe out and everything, as you add it to a drink, let's say soda or beer, that's what gives the bubbles in soda and beer, right? And champagne, it actually makes it acidic. Do you guys know that? The pH of soda is actually like 3.5, okay? That's very acidic. I actually do an experiment where I put seashells in clear soda, like 7-Up, and it's dissolved by the end of the week. It's acidic, so think about that for your teeth. Okay, and now we take that and go to the ocean. As we add more and more CO2 to the atmosphere, in my lifetime it's gone from like 0.03% to 0.04%. In my lifetime, it's increased, whatever that is, 33%. So that CO2 is going in. And you may have heard in the news recently that the global warming that we've been documenting is slowing down a little. It's because the CO2 is being absorbed by our friend. Our friend is the ocean, okay? But as that ocean absorbs the CO2, it becomes more acid, more like soda pop. And so think of that poor little seashell in the 7-Up. But of course we have corals and we have microscopic plankton, the basis of the food chain, and they're really, really small, so acid does a job on the little creatures more than the big coral reef. Okay, but everybody's favorite thing in the ocean is coral reefs. How many of you have been to coral reef ever? Caribbean, Cancun, any place like that? Hawaii? Yeah. If you do any research on that or talk to any researcher on coral reefs, they'll tell you the biggest fear is this global climate change that's going on. But they would say, and I say too, it shouldn't be called global climate change, it should be global climate and ocean change, because the changes in the ocean are as severe as in the atmosphere. And so it's the temperature combined with the acidification. Okay, and then what we're afraid of, and I like to stress with the students, you're in the science center here, and we like to get them to think of positive feedback loops and feedback. And here's an example of a positive feedback loop that is negative, that is a bad consequence, and if it happens. And as a lot of the methane that comes out from the bottom of the sea, whether from volcanic activity or from the decomposition of organic matter, it gets stuck down there. It doesn't bubble up. And methane is natural gas. Do you have natural gas in your house? And it normally would just bubble up, all throughout the ocean. But it's so much pressure down the bottom of the ocean. It's enough to crush submarines. It's tremendous pressure. And it's cold. It's 39 degrees. It's ice water cold. As a result, it freezes the methane. And it's really cool stuff. And it's one of the most amazing things in oceanography is that you've got all these ice buried in them, but it's not water ice. Right? It's closer, if you've probably seen dry ice, you know how it's very different. This is methane ice. And the problem is as the oceans warm up, it's going to release this methane. You say, who cares? The ocean's not going to burn or anything like that. The problem is the methane is even a more effective greenhouse gas than CO2. It's like 30 times more effective. And there's not a lot of it, unfortunately, in the atmosphere. But if it starts getting released from the deep sea, then you have see what I mean by positive feedback? It's not a positive development, it means it gets out of control. And the more that happens, the more it's going to happen in the future. And then I'm going to discuss 3 positive feedback loops. Okay, so as I told you before, my specialty is global climate change as it pertains to polar regions. This is the Palmer Research Station that I was in, and I was lucky I got to go and on the same boat and the same time as Buzz Aldrin, the famous astronaut. And so I'm so lucky that I got to work with Buzz. I got to answer his astronomy question. He asked me how far away the moon was from the Earth, and I thought, I know that. I'm telling you, Buzz Aldrin is, and I said, do I look like a rocket scientist? So, and then as you know, you probably heard, we have an astronaut that's a former geology major here at El Camino, and he was here during my first year. So I've had the luck of working with the best known astronaut of all and being part of the background of the best known astronaut from El Camino. So anyway, so a lot of my statistics, a lot of my knowledge is from Palmer Research Station, which I'm going back to, by the way, in Christmas. That's what I'm doing for Christmas. I don't know about you guys. So, all right, this is, I think you probably heard this. This is pretty well publicized, is that the amount of sea ice that is, we used to have, let's say back when I was in college, was so much, and it's decreased. And the most interesting thing is the coast of Russia is now ice-free in the summertime. In fact, the ship that I just showed you a picture of, they're up there right now. They are doing the first time ever, they are making it through the Northwest Passage with no icebreaker. If they can do it, that means oil tankers and cargo ships. In our lifetime, we're going to see them starting to, the famous Northwest Passage that all those explorers wanted to see is now open. Not all the time, just like at the end of August, early September. But there's physical proof of what's happening here. And then if you are into graphs, you can see that it decreases through time. And it's even lower than in the year 2010, the year I was there, and 2013, it was even lower. So it doesn't go down every year, but about every 3 years, it makes a big jump. And scientists are always going for averages. We look for averages. We don't care if it's warm and muggy today. We care what's happening over the long term, at least over several years. I was in Greenland just last month, and so as you probably are aware, Greenland is not green. It's all ice and a little tiny bit of land. And this is, their population is Inuit, better known as Eskimos. And it's quite interesting that they have a traditional lifestyle. They don't go like to university necessarily and watch TV at night. They don't have any television. It was really refreshing to go to a society where there's kids running around and they're not doing television. But they make their living off of killing things. They actually go out and hunt. That's the traditional Inuit lifestyle. And it's fascinating. They even get vitamin C from the skins of seals. And they've evolved that way. They bacteria in their stomach and everything. It's all about hunting. But as you know, what happens when the ocean warms up? There's less nutrients, so therefore less plankton, and therefore less fish, and therefore less animals. And here's a good example. I went on a helicopter flight, and this bay used to be frozen in July. It doesn't look frozen to me. Okay, this has happened in just the last 20 years. What's that mean to an Inuit, an Eskimo Inuit? Their town is, their town's over here. They have to go much, much, much farther to get frozen ice, because what they're hunting is best hunted on ice. It doesn't matter whether they're hunting polar bears or whether they're looking for seals, they need ice. It's part of their lifestyle. It's part of the polar bear's lifestyle too. All right, this is our guide, Inuit guide. And what he was doing, he was poking the ice, he was getting us through a channel because nobody had ever been through that channel before. And we were in a little boat, and he wanted to be the first one to say, I'm the first one to get through the channel. And we did it. And I got the video of it, and it's soon to be on my website. If you want to check out my website, it has a whole bunch of about 50 short videos from all around the world, and earth science from all around the world, and about 10% of them pertain to global climate change. And my favorite thing is kayaking. So I had to throw this in just to make you realize the beauty of Greenland and Alaska and Svalbard and places. It's really stunning. It's not all bad news. All right, so good. But continuing that same thought, this is Antarctica. There's the ship, and it all looks like, oh, perfect. But I want to point out this area here, this dark volcanic valley was all snow just 10 years ago. And now, in the same month, this would be January. And it will be interesting, when I go back this year, it'll be the first time in 4 years, I'm going to take photos and compare. And I'm going to be there same time of the year. But this used to be snow covered all the time, all year long, and now you can see. Okay, and the same thing here. This bay used to be frozen in January, and now it's not so frozen. And so who cares? Well, it has to do with the darkness. As you can see, volcanic soil is pretty dark. and water, you don't think of it as dark, but it's dark. It absorbs a lot more light. So compare that to what used to be there, ice. Ice reflects like 99-point-something% of all the solar energy that hits it. Water absorbs about half, and volcanic soil absorbs over 90%. Okay? So what's happening is Antarctica and these places are getting warmer. It's another positive feedback loop. And that's what those of us who research this are most afraid of, is the positive feedback loops. Okay, this also has been publicized a lot. You've probably heard of these icebergs the size of Delaware breaking off. There was one the size of Delaware, and as if we know what Delaware is. Okay? And every year one the size of Rhode Island breaks off. And where are they coming from? They're not coming from the land. They're coming from the ice shelves. And there's these huge areas, they're bays. You know, some are the size of Santa Monica Bay, and some are like the size of Baja. There's just these huge bays and seas that are covered with ice 1,000 feet thick. It's astounding how thick this ice is. And here's one at Palmer Research Station they researched, because Palmer Research Station is only 30 miles away, and so they could fly over and visit this and everything. But they've documented all these shelves breaking up. And the fear is the big shelves breaking up. Now, this ice is floating. It's not increasing the sea level. The problem is this ice is holding back glaciers and ice caps. And so if these all break loose, every time one of these breaks loose, there's less anchor. Okay? And so you get more flow. And when the ice comes down from the land into the sea and melts, that's what increases sea level. So it's not the ice shelves per se breaking up, it's the fact that they become unanchored. Okay, and there's two species that are very popular amongst Americans in particular. And one is the emperor penguin, and my only picture of emperor penguin is here. So get out your binoculars, okay? And that's what we always tell everybody. Always have a pair of binoculars around your neck, and I forgot to tell you to bring your binoculars today. But emperor penguins are the ones that march the penguins. You know, they're yellow-breasted and everything. They rely on ice, and if you ever watch Marching Penguins or any documentary, you know that they rely on ice as part of their life cycle. And they don't live on bare land like a lot of penguin species. And the polar bear is another one. In fact, it is the poster child for global climate change, because a polar bear needs to have ice to hunt. Why? Because they go around and they get like 90% of their food from eating seals that have come up through breathing holes. And when they come up, they nab them or that, you know, and they rely on ice. And the problem when I go up there in July is these guys are not eating. They're starving. So they're wandering around the land. And so I have to learn and I have to carry a rifle, a really powerful rifle. Everybody who's in Svalbard or Greenland has to carry a rifle, because these are the most deadly animals. But only in the summertime when they don't have sea ice. Why? Because they need sea ice. So obviously as the sea ice decreases, the polar bear is in danger. There's 20,000 of them now, and the population is starting to go down. And believe me, people are tracking these. These are very, very popular. We call them charismatic megafauna. Okay? And this is my photo that I was hoping would be in National Geographic magazine, but I guess not. So that's my favorite photo. That's my screensaver on my phone. So, and if you've never seen a wild polar bear, they live on sea ice. Now this polar bear looks like it has a real beautiful setting, but that isn't. Those are puddles. Those are puddles forming on top of the sea ice. Guess what? They weren't there 10 years ago. And so this polar bear family is spending a lot of their energy going around. But this is what we call a curious bear. It had never seen a ship before, so it came up and smelled this, and now it's like trying to get on board. It's just never seen a ship before. So you could consider them sort of innocent bystanders here. Okay, another very complicated thing, I won't go into great detail, but you're welcome to research it or come by and talk to me, is this amazing conveyor belt that is happening. It's mostly been uncovered in the last 20, 30 years, so you may not have heard about it when you were in school. But the ocean water goes through this huge 3,000-year conveyor belt. And it all relies on sinking up there near Iceland and Greenland. Right? That's the source of almost all the deep water in the world. Well, the problem is if Greenland is going through melting, as you will see here. And as Greenland melts, the water pours into the ocean. It's fresh water, and the fresh water forms a cap on the top. If you have a cap of fresh water, you may not know this, but fresh water floats on seawater. And if you have a cap of fresh water, you cannot have downwelling. So this is predicted to slow down through time. It's not happening dramatically. Remember, everything's very slow. All right, this is a 3,000-year-long system, and Hollywood got a hold of this and made it happen in one day. Did anybody see Day After Tomorrow? They made this happen in one day, and New York City froze or something like that. It's like, what the heck? So Hollywood and science are not a good combination. Okay, something that would affect your price of gas, I suppose, and is the permafrost. And you probably don't care much about Russian permafrost, but Alaska is the source of a lot of our oil here on the East Coast. And the big famous Alaska pipeline is a perfect example. It was put in the 70s. And permafrost is permanently frozen groundwater in places like Alaska, northern Canada, and Russia. The problem is when it melts, it makes a mess. It turns into mush. And if you can imagine a whole landscape of mush, things like pipelines and runways and roads and railroads, it's just a mess. And here again, places that are warming up are having more vegetation and more like the heather that is so beautiful in Scotland and everything, and the willow brush that the caribou like so much, but they absorb a lot of light, and so there's that positive feedback loop again. And when the permafrost crumbles, it makes a mess, as I was saying. And so think of a pipeline crossing this landscape, and suddenly there's a collapse. And they say every day a pipeline in Russia and Siberia breaks. It spills oil all over. Every day. All right, and some people say, I'm still not convinced it's going to affect a lot of people, but I want to bring this up. On this map, you can see half of humanity lives on this map. Not quite half, maybe a fourth. Why? Because we have India here, Pakistan, Bangladesh has more people than Russia, and then over here is China. And this mountain range you probably recognize as the Himalayas, and the Himalayas are the water source for half of China and half of India, more than half of the population of India, and all of Pakistan and Bangladesh. So basically you're talking almost half the people in the world get their water supply directly or indirectly from a mountain range. This one mountain range. Now we have the same thing here. Where 1/3 of our water comes from is the California aqueduct coming from the Sierras. Okay, LA gets their water in the LA aqueduct from the Sierras. And 1/3 of our water comes from the Colorado, coming from Colorado mountains. So we have our mini version of this out west here. And this, I'm sure you've heard of, is that this has been publicized here, especially with our drought going on, that as we have warmer and warmer air, we have less and less snowfall. And we rely on that snow all year long to melt and give us our water, whether you're in California or whether you're in the Ganges Valley or whether you're over here along the Yangtze or down here. Karachi is the fastest growing city in the world. And they get their water all the way up here. So that's something to think about. Okay, and then this is probably the most famous thing and potentially the most expensive thing that we have to worry about is the sea level rising. Half the people in the world live near the ocean. I think you've heard that. We certainly live near the ocean. New York, London, Shanghai, Rio de Janeiro, all these places are near the ocean. And if you're into wildlife, you think of where's the richest, most productive place in the world are the wetlands along the ocean. So sea level rise is important. Most people know that this is going on. About 95% of the glaciers in the world are melting away. And both huge ice caps, both Greenland and Antarctica, are suffering from melt, surface melt, which I'll show you later on. But most people don't know about this. This is, you pretty much have to take oceanography to understand that 1/3 of the sea level rise predicted for the next century is from the expanding of water. Why? Because if you heat up anything, right, it's going to expand. All right, and these are some graphs. I know it's a little too much information on one slide, but it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in New York, San Francisco, Honolulu, you can see the sea level rising. And the predictions are up to 1 meter in the next 100 years. And you and I don't have to worry about it. We won't be around in 100 years. But you think of our students here on this campus, the students here in the STEM Center, they're future scientists, right? And they're going to have to figure out what to do about this. 3 feet rise in their lifetime, 1 human lifetime. So. All right, here's some evidence for it, this is Greenland, and in 2005, only half of Greenland was melting away, the part that's in the red. But it's getting more and more, and last year the headlines were 100% of the surface of Greenland was melting in the summer. So in Greenland, all the ice is above the sea level, so the water's gotta go somewhere, right? It goes down into the ocean, and it has to lead to the rise. Here's one of my most stunning, beautiful places I've ever been in my life. It's just an amazing place. It's an ice cap, a smaller ice cap in Svalbard, Spitsbergen area, way the northernmost inhabited land in the world. And I was there in July. And this is happening. Where there used to not be any waterfalls 10 years ago, there were a lot of waterfalls. Not just one, but count them. One here, one there, one there. And it's beautiful, stunning scenery, but not good news at all. And the sound's not working here, so I'll just pretend. Okay, you get the idea. It is beautiful, absolutely stunning, but these waterfalls did not exist 10 years ago. So here's physical proof, and every year you're getting greater and greater flow. They're coming from an ice cap. You can see the ice cap, how riddled it is with these melt water channels. And all that, this is what it used to look like. And with no ice, no waterfalls. Okay, so you can guess that we're going to deal with flooding. Of course, that's pretty publicized. But what isn't so well known is hurricanes and storms and El Nino storms feed on the heat of the ocean. You cannot have a hurricane without a warm ocean. Hurricanes are superstorms, out of control superstorms, largest storms on Earth, but they totally rely on warm water. As soon as they hit land, what happens to them? They're gone. That's what happened last week in Baja. And as soon as they hit cold water, they're gone. All right. So as the water warms up, the hurricanes are going to increase in number and strength. Okay, the same with El Niños. El Niño's coming this year. We don't know if it's 50-50, whether it's going to be a big one or a bust. Okay, but we know what to expect. We're all preparing for it. The authorities are preparing for floods. We're preparing for storms. We're preparing for monster rains. Okay, and the warmer the ocean, the more extreme the El Niños will be. And then this one is one that's not publicized, is saltwater intrusion. A lot of the people around the world live near the ocean, as I mentioned, and they get their water from underground. In fact, we get about 90% of our water supply from underground around the world. It doesn't matter whether for agriculture or industrial or residential. But as the sea level rises, that doesn't just rise on the surface, it also pushes underneath. And the groundwater is a major resource. That's where the big jobs are in the oil industry, and hydrology and all aspects of geology. I tell my geology students that your future is probably in the movement of fluids underground. So start getting used to that idea. And you can make a really, really good living at it. Why? Because we need oil coming out of the ground, we need water coming out of the ground, and we don't need salt water. Okay? How do we keep this from happening in South Bay area? We actually have to have wells all along the 405 area, the corridor, and pump water down. We waste some of our water to keep the salt water out of our groundwater. So we're doing it. It's happening here. But as the sea level rises, it's more severe. And this, if the polar bear is the poster child for the global climate change, the Maldives is the poster country. You can see they're a little bit crowded, okay, and they don't have much place to go. And their prime minister does nothing overseas except yell and scream about global warming and how it's increasing sea level and it's going to wipe out the country. And so certain countries like this that are built on atolls, they only have two choices: build walls around their country or move. And one of the countries have actually bought property in India. The idea they might have to move their whole country. So that's something to think about. These are pictures I took in Venice. Both times I've been in Venice, it flooded. And Venice, as you probably know, is one of the most awesome places in the world. It's one of probably the 5 most awesome museum cities in the world. But it floods 20 times a year. And why? Because when a storm comes in, it brings in, it has a storm surge. And well, with sea level rising, places like Venice and other coastal gems in the world will continue to flood. This is me trying to learn to ice. I walk on ice. It's very hard. Don't try it at home. It's very, very difficult. And I finally gave up and put those spiky things on the bottom of your feet, you know, and that was a little more successful, but it's not as easy as it is. Okay, I already mentioned hurricanes will increase in strength, and this is something in Florida and Louisiana and the Carolinas to worry about. My parents live in Florida, so I'm keenly aware of the evacuation routes and the emergency preparedness they have. Everybody knows about Katrina. Katrina was our worst natural disaster in the recent history, and it killed 1,200 people, and it was due to flooding. It was the wind didn't kill anybody, the rain didn't kill anybody. It was the ocean flooding and knocking over the barriers that it held for 50, 100 years. It was a man-made fault that it happened, but it was a natural storm surge. And then, of course, a couple years ago, we had Hurricane Sandy, and it hit our largest metropolitan area head-on, smack, couldn't possibly hit the worst place, but that's typical. Big cities tend to be along estuaries, these funnel-shaped estuaries that just funnel the storm surge right in, and you may remember the picture of the water pouring into the subway in lower Manhattan. So what are they going to do? Are they going to build a storm surge barrier? And then it doesn't just happen to rich countries. The Philippines got hit really bad last year, and a lot of us gave money to help the people, because it was total devastation. But rich countries can build storm barriers. This happens to be one outside St. Petersburg. If you take a cruise ship into St. Petersburg, if you're aware of it, about 10 miles before you get to St. Petersburg, Russia, there's this monster barrier that they built, and it keeps the storm surges from flooding the most beautiful city in Russia. This is Holland. Holland got hit really bad back in the 50s, so they're the only country that have built a whole coastal system. And yes, this is the future. But is that pretty? Is that natural? Would you like to go there? Would you like to spend your vacation where there's a big wall between you and the ocean? We won't have a choice, okay? Rich countries can do this. Holland did it over the last 50 years. The United States can do it. England can do it. What I worry about is Bangladesh with the population of Russia, and they're poorer than anything. You know, it's like the poorest country in Asia, and they can't afford that, and we can't afford to build it for everybody either. So we're Californians. I think you've all heard this, that we're some of the leaders in the world for wind power, solar power. Reforestation is another way that we can do it, because obviously trees and plants are our friends. They remove the CO2, but as you know, that the deforestation is happening more rapidly than we can reforest. The wealthy countries, we're getting deforestation happening in places like Brazil. And the worldwide consensus seems to be to reduce CO2 emissions, and this has been going on for almost 10 years. And so Europe is reducing their emissions, and so they are trying to get back to their 1990 levels. Believe it or not, the United States is reducing. A lot of people don't realize that we're doing it with alternate energy. It's actually going down, but we produce a lot because we have our big cars and the distances between cities and things like that, and huge commutes. And so, but ours is going down, but we're still in that about 1/4 of all the CO2 in the world comes from this one country, and we only have 5% of the population. So is that fair? Not really. If you ask someone from Bangladesh, they'll say that's not fair. The big culprit is China. China's increasing. They're building a new coal-powered power plant like every week. It's out of control. They used to be, when I started giving these talks, they were 1/4. They were even with the United States, and now they're up to 33% of the CO2 emissions. So China is out of control. So even though as we start to reduce, and Europe definitely is going way, way past the United States, we gotta have some sort of agreement. You know, we can't do it alone, and so it's something to think about. And this is the neutral information I told you about. These guys are government scientists, and if anybody wants this and doesn't want to write it down now, just email me, and or you can watch this whole speech all over again online and to get to the end. But remember, these guys, their bosses are Congress and the president. All right, their bosses are Republicans and Democrats. So this is neutral information. These are guys that have devoted their life. Some of them have been down there for 20 years. And I'm like, don't you have a family life? You know? So they really, really have they literally have given their lives to research this. I just go and pick up the gems and everything. I have the best job in the world, 2 best jobs in the world. But these guys are giving their life to study this. So, and I always end with a pretty picture. So iceberg photos are my favorite. So any questions or anything? I don't know if you want questions. Did I go over?
No.
Okay. And we can turn the lights on too if you would like.
So it's all pretty scary news. Do you think there enough things are being done to slow this down?
I think the model for the world is what Europe's doing. Their economic problems they've had have nothing to do with alternate energy. Europe's a rich society, and they are, oh my gosh, I don't know if you've been to Europe, but you go through the German countryside and you see power plants. Danish, you take a cruise off the Denmark and you see big, huge windmills that are like 30 miles out to sea. You can't see them from land. And And they have more solar panels per house in Germany, cloudy, cold Germany, than we have in California. What's wrong with that? So I think, I'm an optimist, I'm always an optimist. I really think the United States will start doing what Europe, we are starting, but we'll continue to do what Europe is, and we'll have a lot more solar power panels, and we'll have a lot more wind power. And we have the largest solar power plant in the world just before you get to Las Vegas. It's on the left side of the freeway. So I think we're just slow. And I'm not so optimistic about China or India's coming right behind China. Everything India's doing, everything China's been doing, India's going to be doing in the next 20 years. So it's not so optimistic worldwide, but I think in America, I'm very optimistic. But I'm hopelessly optimistic. And you may have heard, just kind of questions I normally get from a well-educated crowd like yourself, you may have heard that some glaciers are increasing, and they are in certain parts, like the western Himalayas. This is just like 10% of the Himalayas. It is increasing because there's more warm water, so there's more evaporation, so therefore more snow. And so certain places like the Pakistani Himalayas are increasing, but the problem is the 90% of the Himalayas that are decreasing. The same in Alaska. If you've ever been up to Glacier Bay, there's one into the Tar Inlet at the end of Glacier Bay. Those are the only glaciers that are increasing. The rest are decreasing throughout North America. So when you hear some interesting thing, the most important thing is to go to neutral sources and see what is there's always a counter answer. You have to be very careful for the information that's flowing in our society. Make sure it's coming from scientists and not politicians or your brother or your daughter or something like that. It has to come from a reputable. As we stress in science, it has to be peer-reviewed, and it has to be repeatable, our experiments. We don't just listen to what somebody says. So, yes?
What would be your response? I've heard speakers say that the global warming, that they're not arguing that the temperatures are increasing, but that it's part of a larger natural cycle.
Okay, great question, and we just talked about this today in lab. The ice ages are on about 100,000 year cycle due to the wobble of the Earth, and there's an interglacial period, and we should be at the end of it. We should be going back into a glacial period at this point. If you look at, and I chose not to show that to you, but this is available online or in any geology textbook, and we should be cooling off at this point. There's, if you look at the cycles, we shouldn't be increasing. And I think, remember the first thing, about the first slide I pointed out, the fact that the CO2 and the temperature both went down right after World War II. I think that's the convincing argument. It's not a controlled experiment, but it's the best we can do. It's the only time in the last 100 years where almost all the industry in Europe and Asia was destroyed. The CO2 went down and the temperature went down for the following 20 years. Because it was, as you know, it was a total wipeout. Russia was wiped out. Germany was wiped out. China, Japan. It was, there was way less emissions. So that's my answer. It's twofold. That we should be heading into an ice age, and that if you look at the 1940s and 50s, you'll see it go down. Everything goes down. Okay, well, you're welcome to ask me any questions now, afterwards, or you can email me. I'm easy to get a hold of. Next question?
I had a quick question. Since things are cyclical, could you just wait it out? Could nature just take care of it? And
if we, yes.
And us not.
And I got a perfect answer to that. Because ozone, we stopped producing ozone, and a long time ago, I was in college when the treaty was decided on that. And if you stop doing it, it will repair itself. And the ozone hole is starting to close up. Ozone has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Ozone is because we did something about it. When was I in college? 40 years ago. We did something about it. It took 40 years to stop the damage, and now it's going to take another 70 to repair. So yes, it would. The problem is where every day, and probably everybody in this room, we're putting out fossil fuel. We're burning fossil fuels and we're putting out more CO2. But yeah, it would repair itself if we stopped creating the problem. In my dreams. Yes?
You know, all these forest fires we're having, what kind of impact?
Forest fires are not that significant for a CO2 source. They affect us more as humans, and because obviously they're burning up our things. But when a forest fire occurs, that's also contributing to CO2. But it's nothing compared to, it's inconsequential compared to, the graph is about 1/4 is from power generation, about 1/4 is from cars.
I mean, the millions of acres that have lost CO2 consumed in
Oh, yes. It's actually more detrimental because about 1/4 of that pie is the loss of vegetation and from deforestation. And so on a short, like for let's say 10 years, 5 years after a forest fire, you've lost that ability to do photosynthesis and to get rid of the CO2. But that most forest fires, that regenerates. The problem with deforestation, like in the Amazon or the Congo, is it's permanent. El Salvador, has anybody been there? There's no forest left, and there's certain places. Malaysia, there's no forest left. It's all palm oil orchards from one end to the other. And so that permanent loss is much more serious. And so I'm glad you brought it up. So the pie is really easy. It's like in the 1/4 is power generation, running our lights, and pumping our water over the mountains to come here. This is what I tell students when they take long showers. I say, we have to pump that water. Okay. And then 1/4 is from cars, and 1/4 is from deforestation. Yeah. Which is the easiest to solve. There's not much alternative to cars, but power plants. That's why we're working on the alternate power generation. We're working on the easiest one.
How does the use of natural gas in these places?
Natural gas, if you're using it for heating, is actually more efficient because you're doing the primary, so you're only going through one power transition. You're burning the natural gas, creating the heat for your house. And it burns very clean. It's the cleanest of the 3 fossil fuels. Coal is by far the dirtiest. Right? If you compare it to petroleum, natural gas is like half, and coal is about twice as much. So if you're heating in a house in the United States with natural gas, it's by far the best of the alternatives. Now, if you're heating with electrical, the problem is you're producing the electricity, and we produce half our electricity in America by burning coal. Okay? And you're using coal to make half of it, and maybe natural gas for the other half. So the average is somewhere like burning oil. And then you're transmitting that over, and then it comes over and heats up a coil. It's very inefficient because you have 2 transfers of energy. So natural gas is the best. The worst is, by far, is to run a coal-burning power plant, run electricity over, and then create the
Do you
power.
think we'll ever come to using more natural gas then?
Yes, yes. And the good news, because we have geologists, and as Katie said, we have the largest geology program in the whole state, possibly the whole country, amongst all community colleges. Thanks to geologists, we're finding natural gas. And no matter how you feel about fracking is like double the amount of natural gas, so we are flooded with natural gas. We're going to actually start exporting natural gas in a year or 2. And so that's the good news. In America, I think the main reason we are reducing our CO2 output is because of this boom in natural gas. And so it's not really because we're being good and we're building power, windmills and solar panels. It's because of the natural gas phenomenon.
But natural gas still produces CO2.
It does. It just produces less than what we've had in our lifetime is an average about half our electricity has been from coal, and coal's the bad one. For every $1 per cubic foot that the natural gas goes down, we're putting a power plant, a coal power plant out of business. And so we're switching out, not me personally, not you, but the society, the utilities are switching from coal power to natural gas because of the low price.
So you're talking about the percentage of heat energy that's produced in the burning of whatever it is we're burning now.
Right, and that affects the electricity, right, yeah, because our electricity, most of our electricity is from burning fossil fuels, and I think it's 3/4 of our energy is from burning fossil fuels. So the question is which one? And in my dreams, if I was master of the universe, I'd say no more coal. There's enough coal being burned in China, we don't need any more. But of course, you know the reality is we have like 10 senators from coal, and that's the coal mining states, and those 10 senators have very powerful. And so we're not going to ban coal. It's impossible to live. Yes?
Are those like Pennsylvania and West Virginia?
Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky. That's the big coal belt. But also Wyoming. Okay? Wyoming is the #1 coal producer now. It doesn't provide that many jobs. It's not like guys going off like the Seven Dwarfs, you know, and it's just some guy in a huge truck the size of this building with a scoop the size of this room, scooping up the coal and putting it in trains, and then the trains, of course, using fossil fuel to get there, and then trains are going out. And so that's really where our coal's coming from. It's not like this big job producer like it used to be. It's basically just a few people in these big monster machines, and that's half our electricity is from the coal. So you got a contest. You think fracking's bad? It's arguable. Fracking could be bad, but you got fracking releasing all this clean natural gas versus these companies that are with these big, huge scoops the size of this room, just dumping the coal and say, take it, make energy. So you got a competition. There's, and then the alternative, as you know, is can't build any more dams because they're destructive, and we can't build any more nuclear power plants because it doesn't seem to be flying here. And so you got to make electricity somehow. And in my opinion, coal is the enemy. But that's just me.
Is the synthetic fuel like corn? Is that I've heard that's real inefficient.
It is very inefficient. Corn, and I have friends that are farmers. My best friend's a farmer, and I think corn is they spend as much CO2, produce as much CO2 growing the corn as they make reducing our fossil fuels. The hope is, and to be an optimist, is there's thousands of scientists working on this, and is to come up with enzymes to take grass and the waste from wheat fields and the waste from corn fields, not the corn itself, but the waste products, and use these enzymes to turn them into sugars and use those sugars to make health. And I think that's coming. It's just going to be a price. It's all going to be we live in a capitalist society, and so that price has to come down enough. But I think that's the hope. So there is optimism. And solar panels are coming down in price every year. So I think we'll eventually have a lot. There's a development going on across the street from me. They just announced their plans, and every home is going to have a solar panels on the roof, every single one. The city's insisting on it. So that's sort of cool.
Okay, are there any other questions? Well, I just want to thank you, Joe. This was really informative and very...
I want to end, also you guys are my role models. The foundation is my favorite institution, and I've been inspired, so Katie knows this, I've started scholarships, and I'm going to try to get other professors to do it, to leave it in their will and to pay for it in cash because I really think that you guys are allowing so many of our students. You know how many are first generation students, and they really, really appreciate you guys. So I should be applauding you instead of you applauding me, because and especially Katie, she's been so good at getting our
You can imagine imagine sitting in his classroom for a whole semester, we walk away just with this mind just full of all of this important information. So he's just one more representative of the outstanding faculty that we have at El Camino College. And Arturo, what he does with his master programs. And Jean keeps all of the faculty in mind. So thank you all. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the brand new STEM Center. Please, we have some lovely desserts and food.
Food there.
Food.
Finger foods to
Appetizers,
replace
foods and
dinner,
drinks,
beverages.
out on the patio. But please have some food, but take a few minutes and walk around this center because it really is something that we're so proud to have for our students, and we really are producing scientists, engineers, and mathematicians here. And geologists. I just want Joe to quickly say the one story. He mentioned Colonel Michael Fink, which is one of our distinguished alums. He was recognized a couple of years ago, and the reason when he accepted the award, he told the audience that he got into NASA because of the geology instruction that he had and the geology instruction he got here at El Camino. I was telling Joe that earlier, and Joe
I have a funny story.
great connection.
We were out in the desert in Death Valley, and Death Valley can get really boring, you know. And we're lecturing, and one by one the students were looking up, and like, how rude. You know, it's worse than a cell phone, right? And they're looking up, and finally I'm like, okay, what is it? It was a B-2 bomber. It had never been seen. It was secret. It was still, the public didn't know about it. And we're all like, and Michael probably was just like peeing in his pants or something. And it's just like, we're looking at something we had just heard about, and it's flying 1,000 feet above us. It was being towed. It didn't even have an engine in it. And so I thought that's so cool to share that with a future astronaut who flew the space shuttle twice. And I got to share one other thing. The coolest time I've ever seen the space shuttle is they have these apps now. You can tell when it flies over, and you can tell when the space station, Freedom, flies over. And I saw it just before sunset, and then a half hour later was the space shuttle, and he was piloting the space shuttle. And it was the best moment. It was great.
Okay, so, please. Join us out on the patio and wander around and enjoy the STEM Center. Thank you for coming.
It was very clever to have it here.
I know, this is very
I know.